Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Dr. Jinong and I'm your host. I'm a cathartic release therapist, professionally trained as an osteopath, psychosomatic therapist, Western acupuncturist, and herbalist. I'm fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain, whether it be physical or emotional, and live the life they truly desire, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body, as well as behavioural dysfunctions and mental imbalances that present. I do this using a unique blend of Eastern and Western philosophies and a good dose of intuition. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Today I'm joined by Katelyn Parsons, who is a friend that I met in the online space a couple of years ago. She has shared her wisdom with my community, particularly around what intuitive eating is. Katelyn is an entrepreneur, speaker, certified intuitive eating and body image coach. She's also the host of the Modern Girl podcast. After years of struggling with bulimia and disordered eating, she not only found recovery, but recognised a crucial missing link in the wellness industry: empowerment and individual sustainability around health. This inspired her journey and life mission to shift the conversation toward healing our relationship with food and body. For the past 4 years, Katelyn has helped countless creative leaders transform their relationship with food and body image through an integrative, evidence-based process so that they can move through each day feeling more present, empowered, and comfortable in their skin without worrying about what to eat. Okay. Welcome to the podcast, Katelyn. We have shared conversations on your podcast in the past, and I'm glad to have you on here, almost a year later. Can you start by introducing yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Almost a year later. I know, it's so crazy, and I'm so grateful to be with you on your podcast today. And yes, hi to everybody who's listening and your amazing community. I'm Katelyn Parsons. Jen and I go a couple of years back now, and I'm a body image coach, also an intuitive eating coach, and I help high-achieving creative leaders heal their relationships with food and their own body image through an intuitive eating practice and self-trust protocol. And that's the high level of what I do.
Yeah, we'll dive into it a little bit more. I'm always curious how people got into the profession that they did. So what's your journey into being a body image coach and an intuitive eating coach? And actually, probably what we should start off with is, what is a body image coach and an intuitive eating coach?
So an intuitive eating coach is, well, let me just start out by explaining what intuitive eating is for everybody who's listening.
We keep on going a step back.
Because that kind of allows us how we coach on this. But we are all born intuitive eaters. And my story, which we'll get into in just a moment, is a really interesting example of this. But for everybody who's listening, you were born an intuitive eater. You were born with this ability to trust your body and listen to your body in a way that allowed you to recognize when you're hungry, to stop eating when you're full, what satisfaction feels like, how your emotions show up in your body, feeling those emotions, communicating your needs, taking care of yourself to the best of your ability as you grow up over time. So not actually all about food. Food is one component of intuitive eating. And the process of intuitive eating is really dismantling diet culture that we have all been indoctrinated into by way of media, messaging, our culture around us, just different forms of how we should eat and how we should treat our body versus what is intuitive to us. And so by dismantling that, by becoming aware of all of these messages and how we're actually applying it in our life in a way that hinders our ability to trust and listen to our body, when we take that away and we create this foundation to build this trust with ourselves, we're able to learn how to listen to our body, to meet its needs physically, mentally, and emotionally, and really get to this place where we can honor our body with an intuitive lens, with this ability to really respect and honor our body's wisdom in its natural state through listening to when we're hungry, when we're full, how food feels satisfying, which foods we like, which foods we don't like. So it's a unlearning and a relearning process.
Interesting. Because, yeah, a lot of people hear about intuitive eating, but they're like, what is it? So that was a good summary.
Yeah, it's not the eat whatever you want, whenever you want, screw health, everything goes out the window. It really, it is based in scientific research. To date, there's 125 studies to prove the benefits of intuitive eating and how it can really create a healthy relationship with food, mind, and body. It was founded by two incredible dietitians, Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch, who wrote the book Intuitive Eating and are now on the fourth edition of it. And it's almost manifested into this intuitive eating movement and correlates with the body acceptance movement, the health at every size movement, body inclusivity, so many other things. So it goes way beyond food, but it really is, you can go down a rabbit hole of it if you're just starting to become familiar with the concept.
So if we stick down the road of intuitive eating, why do people seek out intuitive eating? What sort of people do you see?
Yeah. Intuitive eating is a great modality for really healing your relationship with food. So essentially, a lot of people come to me and expressing that they want to pursue this when they're at a point where they realize that their relationship with food is sabotaging their ability to live in the present moment. So they're thinking about food more often than they would like to. They're thinking about their body image more often than they'd like to. They're feeling caught up in the shoulds or the shame around what they're eating. There's some moral hierarchy to how they eat versus just being able to really listen to and trust their body and what it needs. And so essentially, it's not always a rock bottom moment for everybody. And very often it is just this frustration where you just throw your hands up and are ready to be done with your thoughts around food and your body image taking up all of this mental space. And there's very often this desire to create more space in your life, more presence, more of an opportunity to cultivate authenticity and confidence. And all of that is facilitated when you really do heal your relationship with food and your body image, because it also has very little to do with food. And so that's where it gets fun in the process as well, too. Unpacking, uncovering, really getting to the root of what is creating this frustration for you, clearing that out, and then rebuilding this foundation physically, mentally, and emotionally for yourself so that you can show up in your life authentically and confidently and with a purpose other than what you're eating or what your body looks like.
Yeah. So do a lot of people think they're coming to you for food and dietary stuff, but then it dives so much deeper?
Yeah. Yes. And I'm also pretty clear. So it just kind of depends on how long people have been in my community. And it also, not everybody is ready to go deeper into that type of work either. And that's why it's so important to really trust yourself and trust your own unique process, and to really listen to your body's own wisdom in deciding if this is something worth pursuing or not, because it gets messy, and I'm also I'm very careful about scope of practice. And I'm a big, big believer in working with therapists and trauma specialists and individuals who can really facilitate deeper conversations that are outside of my scope. And very often a therapist works beautifully with a intuitive eating practitioner or body image practitioner. It just allows us to take the work so much deeper. But I also do my work through a therapeutic lens as well. So I really do unpack a lot with clients and like to get to the root. So yes, there is that knowingness of, okay, it's about food, or I think it's about food, but I also have this idea that it's something bigger than that. And I'm really ready to just shake things up and heal this and move forward. Yeah.
I'll probably get you to share, if you're able to, just some examples in a minute, but we'll find out what is a body image coach and why do people seek that out?
So a body image coach really allows us to look at your relationship with your body and the value that you have on your body and what that means in your life at this point. And so we all have a story. We all have a body image story and our own unique body image timeline. And also, similarly to food and our relationship with food, we also cultivate our relationship with our body in a world where there is many, many messages thrown all around us regarding how we should be in our bodies, how we should look, how we should show up, what we should do to take care of them. And so with all of this noise, it really dissipates that, again, internal wisdom, authenticity, and confidence to show up as you are in your whole unique body that is separate from the skin that you're in. So this is where we get really deep into values work, identifying core values and going through a process of evaluating how you're living in alignment or out of alignment with your values. Purpose, confidence. This is where we really, again, get into a lot of unpacking and digging into the root cause of what triggers your negative body image, why that's coming up. And really zooming the lens out and looking at your body image more holistically. Once again, I say this a lot, physically, mentally, and really starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together so that you have an idea of really being able to live in this body without it feeling like it is controlling your life, where you're able to thrive in this world and separate your value from your body.
Super interesting. And then, yeah, the body image and the intuitive eating, it all ties in with one another.
It does. It does. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do one without the other. I will say, and especially with the clients that I work with, I really specialize in binge eating. And so I tend to do more body image work later on in a coaching process. That doesn't mean that always happens that way. I take a really curated, introspective approach with each of my clients. It's not a one-size-fits-all model, but the most important part of healing your relationship with yourself is making sure you're nourishing yourself adequately. And so that really starts with making sure that you're eating consistently throughout the day, eating enough food throughout the day, and having a wide variety of foods. And that's really the baseline so that you have enough energy physically, mentally, and emotionally to be able to do all of this other work. And that gets a little tangled up in itself as well too, Jen, because I'm sure a lot of people are hearing this perhaps, and I know I felt this way 100%, but I thought, oh, cool, that's a formula. I can plug that in. I can do that. I'll just eat food. I'll eat through the day. I'll make sure it's enough. And I'll, add in what I think is a variety. And what the hiccup tends to be is we have a hard time identifying foods that we are subtly restricting and keeping a moral hierarchy around, and foods that induce these feelings of shame or feeling out of control or unworthiness. And so when we get to the variety piece of the puzzle in terms of this kind of like 3-step that I just shared, that is where it gets really challenging, because it really relies on making peace with food, making peace with all food, really being able to neutralize food so that you can really identify how foods make you feel, which foods you like, how to have more variety in your day. And that often, if we're not at a place where we're able to make peace with food in that way, that can really set us on an emotional roller coaster. And so that tends to be one of the trickier elements that that I myself really got hung up on, and see a lot of people in my community get hung up on, just because, and it makes sense. Food is emotional, and emotional eating is not bad. Food comes with its own set of emotions, and also how we use it in our lives, it's emotional. But kind of untangling that and really redefining your relationship with food emotionally is important, so that you're able to make peace with foods in that variety component that we're talking about right now.
So was it your own experience that motivated you to work in this space, or something else?
Yeah, no, it was absolutely my own experience. And when I mentioned before, we're all born intuitive eaters, that's where I put that asterisk, that it was a little bit different for me, because I was absolutely born that way. But I also developed an allergic reaction at a really young age. When I was 6 months old, I was a small baby. I had a severe allergic reaction to cheese or dairy, something like that. And so for the first fundamental years of my life, 6 months up to 6 years old, I was not able to touch any type of dairy product. So no cheese, no milk, nothing that contained any of those things. And so, as you can imagine, this was in the 80s. There weren't many products that were dairy free that were readily available. And so
before, like, a vegan was cool.
Yeah, yes,
cool.
exactly. Which for my mom, I can't even imagine. Like it must have been just like so incredibly frustrating and really scary. And I would imagine from a childhood trauma experience, it probably picked up on that fear as well too. But that's the opposite of an intuitive relationship with food, right? I was constantly living in this panic of, my life is kind of on the line. I can't eat this. I have to be hyper vigilant about everything that I eat. So I was never really able to create that intuitive relationship with food in these really impressionable developmental years from a psychology standpoint as a kid. And so that's my own experience. And I just want to share that, because that's very often the opposite of how most people experience food. That doesn't mean that it's not disordered in some way, based on socioeconomic status or, another illness perhaps, or just some other situation. But that was mine. And
what was the allergic reaction that you had?
It was to milk. It was to dairy.
What sort of reaction, allergy did you get?
I was, allergic to dairy. It wasn't lactose intolerant. I was like full on allergy.
Yeah. What was the reaction that you would get though when you were 6 months old?
I'm sorry, reaction. My mom, her story is she was feeding me yogurt and my face just completely blew up, got really red. I stopped breathing, like really, really intense allergic reaction. And had to call like the ambulance and everything, just crazy. I can't imagine being a parent and going through that. And so there's this traumatic experience, and it's all around food, right? So
did you, are you able to eat dairy now? Did you grow out of it?
Yes, I did. At 6 years old, I got the green light. I can eat whatever now, and I'm really, really grateful. But um, that also kind of put me on the opposite side of the spectrum, which in the intuitive eating space, disordered eating, eating disordered space, we know from the cycle of restriction and binging, if you restrict anything, in this case, food, there is almost always going to be a binge from a reactionary standpoint. And so in my case, I had been restricted of all of these foods for 6-7 years of my life. And being a kid, just wanting to fit in, wanting to like try all of these things. I would see pizza commercials and mac and cheese commercials and ice cream and all of these things. And I remember my doctor saying that I could have dairy finally. And I just remember feeling like this is the best day in the world. And I just wanted to try everything. And so once again, like it wasn't really an intuitive relationship with food because it was stemming more out of deprivation. And this was 7 years old, so young.
Yeah, I'm curious, like what other memories did you have when you were being restricted? You talked about, wanting to try things at parties. Is there any other memories that you have about not being able to eat dairy and how it felt as a little kid?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I so appreciate this question. There's so many things. I had to wear a gold bracelet when I was a kid. And this was really, it said allergy on it, and it explained what the allergy was. And basically it was because I was too little to explain it for myself. And so anytime I was at a friend's house or I was in the cafeteria line at school getting lunch, I would just show people the bracelet and they would know. And my mom still has the bracelet. I would love to actually have that one day. But I remember that feeling just really other, not included. It was like a really tangible distinction that I was different and that something was wrong with me, but I also didn't really have the tools to communicate what it was. And so that always felt a little scary. I remember testing out food and, I remember people getting scared when I did that, like just being around a lunch table and trying somebody's piece of cheese, or like I would stick my finger in like a yogurt cup and try it and just like kind of freak people out. And also just the reaction that people would have with that. And it was really intense. And also, what was crazy is I had not had another experience like that since I was a baby. So it wasn't like I had this trajectory of allergic reactions that followed. It really was that one time, but because it was so severe and I had tested positive through all the allergy tests since then, I was put on this protocol that I could not have it. And for this high risk perspective too.
So, I mean, it's possible that was, actually, so how did they decide at 6 that you were okay to have it? Were there allergy markers that went down?
Yeah, they went down. I would get the, I don't know what you call it, Jen. It's the scratch test where you just take the panels on your back with the little wood sticks and then they test the panels, the skin test. Mm-hmm. And I remember that hurting and crying into my grandma's shoulder and that just being really traumatic. There was one test where it came back and it was clear. It had gone down enough to where we could start reintroducing everything back in.
Yeah, right. While you're on the, talking about your experience as a child having all this restriction, how do you feel towards people who are following certain diets and imposing this on their children? So I know that for a while I was really strict on my daughter who's 6 about being gluten-free and dairy-free. But as I started to eat more gluten and dairy and didn't get a reaction, I started to get more lax on her. But I don't mind her eating it, but I do watch her when she could literally like down a whole loaf of bread and butter if it was sitting there. I mean, we don't tend to eat a lot of dairy, have cheese, but what do you have any opinions or anything to share about, all this diet culture that's out there, ways of eating, and then putting this on children who might feel like they're left out and have this restriction in their lives?
Yeah, I appreciate this question too, and I have so much compassion for parents navigating this part of life. I'm not a parent myself, and so I can speak to this with a certain level of expertise, but certainly not lived experience because I don't have kids. And again, just so much compassion for parents navigating this because it's really tricky amidst a culture that is presenting so many shoulds of what you should do with children and whatnot, right? On top of your own relationship with food. So you asked how my own restriction, what you would speak to, how you would share that with anybody who's feeling that restriction on top of having kids. And, one of the biggest takeaways from an element of the story that I just shared is all of the ripple effects that created for myself and really for anybody who is restricting. When you're restricting food, it creates a psychological ripple effect to where you are almost always thinking about the food, what you shouldn't be eating, what you should be eating. So it's taking up the mental space. It's taking up the just real estate in your mind of how often you are thinking about the foods and whether or not it should be eaten or shouldn't. And then there's the emotional repercussion of the guilt or the shame or the judgment, the self-judgment that comes up if you eat the food or if you don't eat the food, or thinking about when you might eat the food and whatnot, because there is this novelty around these certain foods, no matter what it's rooted in as well too. If it's an allergy, that's one thing. That really shifts our relationship with food and the intuitive relationship with food. And we're still able to have an intuitive relationship with food, especially as adults, which is a separate conversation, which we can totally have today if you're open to it. But generally speaking, if you don't have an allergy, it really does create this physical restriction. So not eating the food, the mental repercussion of that, thinking about the food all of the time or the lack of eating it all the time, and then the emotional repercussion of that around the guilt or the shame or the comparison or the doubt, and just at the end of the day zooming out and thinking, wow, how much of this is contributing to my life, and what is it taking away from? When I'm thinking about this, when I'm feeling into this around food, what is that taking away from in my life? And also compassionately getting curious with ourselves and asking the question of, why am I focusing on this? By focusing on this restriction, by focusing on this food, what is that giving me the permission to not focus on in my life? How is it creating a distraction that I might need at this point in my life? So there is that safety element psychologically that we have to be so compassionate and curious with as well too.
Yeah, because there definitely are benefits I have seen in my clients who either work with me or work with other therapists around changing diet and reducing inflammation in the body. I was just sort of laughing because just the responses that Violet gives me sometimes when I buy food, like her eyeballs pop out of her head. She's just so excited that I've bought this food for her. Now, both Gav and I were vegan and quite strict about it for a period of time. And I now look back on that time in my life. That was when I had a lot of skin issues, and I realized how I was trying to control things and try and really work out what was going in my body, environmentally and dietary wise, that might be triggering it. And it was all emotional, actually. So I have definitely loosened off with what I eat now. But we were eating a lot of tomatoes. Everything was tomato based. Is like quite often, if someone doesn't know what to cook you for a vegan or a vegetarian meal, it's something tomato based. And our daughter was coming out in this thing that looked like nappy rash, although she wasn't in nappies. And I did actually end up at the doctor and was prescribed a cortisone cream. And then we realized it was actually tomatoes. And it was only when she had whole tomatoes or sliced tomatoes in salads and stuff, she would always avoid them. But of course, when it was mixed in, she didn't know. So we took that out. And I'm very cautious of her always saying to herself, I can't eat tomatoes. And I'm always like, well, you might be able to one day, or you can eat a little amount, but just not heaps. And if your skin flares up and you start getting like itchy in like the crevices of your elbow and behind your knees, which is where it presents now, then just look at your tomato intake. But you can eat it, but this might happen. But she's a lot better now. But I think we've got to be careful about the words that we use as to why people should or shouldn't eat these things, even our kids too. So like gluten for me and bread, I love it, but I'll only eat it at the end of the day, if at all. Like if I was to eat it this morning and I've got all these interviews lined up, I'd be falling asleep. So I don't exclude it altogether, but I don't eat heaps of it.
Yeah, well, I so agree with you. I think vocabulary is huge, and that's actually a pretty significant exercise that I go through with my clients throughout our coaching process, of just really getting curious around how you're talking to yourself in terms of your relationship with food and your body. This has become so ingrained in most of us without even realizing it, that we don't even realize the vocabulary that we've created for ourselves that is really rooted in this negative bias and this restrictive bias around ourselves and in our relationships to food and our bodies and all of these things. And so it's really interesting that you say that. And I love that. And also, I think I'm big on empowering people to create relationships with food that help them thrive and help them feel amazing in their bodies, from a self-care perspective, from an energy perspective, from just a grounding perspective as well too. And exactly what you're describing is a great example of this. Knowing because I use a similar example too. I love cinnamon rolls. They're like my favorite thing, and I eat them often. But I also, I know through my relationship with cinnamon rolls, if I have a back-to-back day and I have like 7 meetings on the calendar, I need a little bit more energy and sustenance to get me through that day. A cinnamon roll is going to do that for me. It might be a part of my day in some way, but I know what foods are going to give me that brain fuel, that energy, and also really satisfy me so that I'm able to feel grounded and present and in my body, and well nourished adequately throughout the day as well too. So it's not about taking foods out or adding all of the foods in and say like, just go crazy. It's about really building this relationship with yourself where you can trust your body and also work with your body to give it the fuel. Not fuel is another word that is kind of like one of those, like, it could be a negative bias, but give it the nourishment that it needs to really thrive throughout the day as well too.
Yeah.
Food is so much more than fuel.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's dive into what your relationship was with food and how it showed up, and perhaps the emotions behind it as well, if you want to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got that green light to be able to finally eat dairy, of course, I just mentioned that put me into this really exciting, almost binge cycle of food. I remember doing a lot of secret eating. I remember just feeling super disconnected with my body and how full I was as a kid, and just being really confused around it because I had this emotional component of, oh my God, I'm so excited I can eat all of the things. But at the same time, I don't really know when to stop because I had become really disconnected with those signals that my body was giving me. But I also didn't pay that much attention to it because I was 7 years old. And thankfully at that time, I hadn't really come into diet culture yet or anything. And where it really started to take a turn was in middle school, going on my first diet, really experimenting with heavy restriction, all through my teenage years. And that restriction led to binging. You
Why
know,
did you try a diet? Was your weight an issue?
it wasn't. It wasn't. I had a moment where um, I felt like I was different than my friends. We were back to school shopping, going into middle school, and everybody had a different size clothing in the juniors department, and mine happened to be a size bigger than all of my friends at the time. And it was also like looking back, because it's never really about the food. It was that need to control and feeling really scared about change and all of this newness. And, you know, you're changing so much when you're a kid. There's a reason why so many adolescents play around with food restriction and just their relationship with food. Unfortunately, it's just, you're on the brink of so many things changing. And on top of that change, you know, things going on in my personal life, things going on at school, and all of that, I think kind of just set me up to really feel like I needed something to grab onto, and it happened to be food. And it was also an easy way to get that control need met without me being able to articulate it at that time, because I saw diet messages everywhere. I just thought it was something that everyone did. You know, when you're 12 years old and you're watching cartoons and Special K ads, like for the Special K diet or Slim Fast or whatever, it really just starts to mess with your mind in a way that you feel like that's really normal. And so for me, I just thought, okay, well, this is just what women do. Women pursue weight loss. That's just how you exist in this world. Again, I didn't have the vocabulary to articulate that, but that's the narrative that was kind of deep into my mind at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And also genetically, I'm in a smaller body, and my entire family has the genetic makeup of being in a straight size body. And so I had my own internalized fat phobia, which I have, you know, in recent years had to do a lot of unpacking around. And it's a part of how I work with clients now as well too. But that, you know, being at a higher weight or in a larger body, that was never a part of my story. It was going through diet culture in a smaller body, which also felt really confusing. And I can only speak from my own experience, but that was kind of the entry point. And then at the end of middle school, I remember feeling like, oh God, I can't take this anymore. And binging for the first time, purging for the first time, the euphoria that comes with purging and the dopamine hit that you get. And at that time, you know, I didn't even identify with being bulimic, and I absolutely was. It just wasn't something that people really talked about, and it felt like the scary eating disorder. You know, I didn't really know a lot of girls who had expressed that they were doing things like that, or that they knew of people other than Lifetime movies or movies that you watched in health class. And, you know, I was never in a body that looked like it was just like a typical, like classic anorexia case. It was always atypical anorexia if we were going to diagnose it. But, you know, you can't really sidestep the symptoms of bulimia. So yeah, that was kind of like the next chapter of my relationship with food, getting into that.
What was the binging like? Was it on all the dairy, or was it just any and every food out there and eating loads of it?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It was really on, I mean, it evolved through the years, and I don't know how specific you want me to get. I don't mind getting specific, but
Go for it. I like details.
sweet. Yeah, me too. You know, it really was a lot of dairy, but I was not using it that way out of resistance, like I wasn't intentionally binging on dairy products because I was connecting the dots that I hadn't been able to have them for so long. Because if you think about it, I was 13 or 14 at the time when I had gone through that phase. It was before I was 7 years old. I didn't even really think about it. Honestly, Jen, I haven't really thought about the fact that I was allergic to dairy until recently. Like, it's really been in the past like 5-ish years in terms of how it's impacted my relationship with food and my relationship with myself. This really goes into a lot of other things that I constantly have to pay attention to: perfectionism, people pleasing, control, anxiety, depression, like lots of mental health things that I am learning to work with constantly versus avoid and pretend they don't exist in my life. And I'm really transparent about that. But digging into that story gave me an opportunity to really name these without shame and feel like I could work on them and also advocate for them as well too. Really destigmatize a lot of these things. But no, I was binging on a lot of things that had dairy without connecting those dots. So everything from crackers and cream cheese to entire pizzas to hummus and carrots. At the beginning in high school and middle school, I was always the healthy eater without really ever getting into any like traditional diets and things like that. It was more just restricting. When I got into college, that's where it really turned a corner. And I mean, the only way I can identify with that phase of my life is it felt like a drug addict. I felt just completely out of control with food and binging and purging multiple times a day.
So is this from the age of 12 it continued? Did you ever have any respite from it?
Yeah, I did have periods where I was able to manage it a little bit better. Like, I remember in high school, I think sophomore to junior year, I had a little break, but other than that, it really was in full force. And as often though, as it was in college, it was pretty much every day, multiple times a day. And
did anyone know? Could anyone see it?
No, I was really good at keeping it a secret. Which was the biggest mind F, because, I was thinking to myself, wow, this is so obvious. I was also constantly worried that somebody was going to find out. So I had this anxiety around somebody finding out. I had this shame around how I was treating my body, because it was in my mind at that time, I was just like, this is so grotesque. Like, this is so unattractive. This is so, like, who would do this? I had this negative voice in my head that was just loud and brought on deep insecurity and shame and embarrassment and all of these things. And also, I don't think, looking back now, I was just really good at hiding. I was really sneaky and really strategic. So I don't think it was super easy for people to find out.
Mm. So what do you think triggered it, apart from maybe having this this allergy and this restriction? What else did you uncover on the emotional level? And I assume that this is when you started going on your own journey of trying to change this.
It actually came later.
Okay, take us through the timeline. What happened?
Oh my God, it's such a long story, but you know what? And I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to take up space. But I think it's a really beautiful story. Like, our stories are a part of us. They bring us to where we are today. There's a reason they exist. They're powerful. And I'm really a big advocate for everybody owning their own stories. So yes, I will not go into all of the nitty gritty details, but basically all through college, just this tumultuous relationship with over exercising, restricting, binging, purging, without a lot of reprieve. I did have a conversation with my parents, I think my sophomore year of college, and let them know that it was going on, because my mom finally discovered it. My mom was a dental hygienist, and I went in for an appointment one time, and every single time I got my teeth cleaned, I mean, I could barely breathe through the whole appointment because I was just anticipating the discovery. I'll never forget the time that I actually went in to get my teeth cleaned and looking up into my mom's eyes, and I knew right away that she found something. And so that was the moment that gave me the permission to just come clean with everything that I had been struggling with. And, there's a lot that we could talk about around that in terms of how I chose to navigate that time and how I would do it differently now. But basically, I saw an outpatient therapist who worked with eating disorders. I stayed in school. I tried to kind of bootstrap my way through my own recovery. My parents were amazing, incredibly supportive, really like there for me the entire time, really encouraging me to get help beyond what I was adamant about getting support with. And after college, I kind of did this dance with going through periods where I wasn't binging and purging and finding my own patterns of disordered eating, and then full-on periods of bulimia. Hit my rock bottom, which I had one when I was 26, and found myself in another bout of bulimia for about a year. And just, I couldn't take it anymore. I mean, I was so attuned to how my teeth were changing and have a lot of trauma around my dental health that I've had to unpack and really heal throughout the years. But I had a moment where I really saw the translucent edges of my teeth start to become more prominent. And I knew, like, if this is what's happening on the surface level, my teeth, what the hell is going on inside? Like, how long am I going to do this to myself? Like, how long am I going to keep these secrets and do this to my body physically? What is this going to lead to? It was this intense fear, and also this moment of just realizing that I was not living my life. Like, I was existing in the world and I was pretending to show up in the world. But I was really good at pretending. But I was not living my life feeling embodied and feeling present or happy with myself. I was so fixated on trying to change things all the time. It felt impossible to just be content with myself. And also, I didn't even know how to begin navigating my life without using food as a tool for that navigation, because it had felt like my coping tool. It really had, for my entire life. And I didn't know how my body worked. I had no concept of when I was hungry, when I was full, what foods I liked, what foods I didn't like. I was on autopilot with like 12 different foods and eating at times. I had like times written out on my desk to try to prevent binges. And yeah, just like so much bullshit. And I had this moment where I knew I had to tell that to somebody, and told my parents, and ended up getting help again. And this time really getting serious about that as well too. And that kind of manifested into orthorexia, which I'm sure you know, Jen, and for everybody who's listening who doesn't know, it's a unhealthy relationship with classically healthy food. And so, we see this, it's super present today in wellness culture, in elimination diets, in, just a lot of these strict, rigid, holistic modalities for healing and food and clean eating and all of these things. And, when I discovered all of this, I didn't know what orthorexia was at that time. It wasn't a term, but when I discovered holistic health and clean eating, I was like the poster child for clean eating. I thought it was the greatest thing that had ever been discovered. I thought it was going to be the thing that cured everything in life. I was mad. I was going through my own emotional process because I thought, oh my God, like if I had discovered this 10 years ago, I probably could have bypassed all of the shit that I put my body through. People in my life might not have passed if this had been something that they had paid attention to. Again, it was all rooted in control. It was like the next green light for what to grab onto to feel in control of something when I was feeling out of control in the rest of my life, because I didn't know myself, because I didn't have that inner wisdom and that inner confidence and that relationship with myself that I so badly needed without even realizing it at that time. And so that was kind of the gateway into getting my certification, holistic health coach. It's so interesting. And this is also not an uncommon story in the dietetics, nutrition, like wellness space in general, healing through food or from movement in some way, and then creating a career around it, essentially, because you become so invested in it. And that's exactly what I did. I spent over a year studying and getting my certification, and it way past that, just through my own personal experimentation of how food was impacting my body. And it really set me into this disordered relationship with food based.
Oh, I've just lost you.
The emotions
I just have to get you to go back. I lost you at it was based in.
Oh, it was based on health and the rigidity of health and just healthy eating and all of these things. And it's so interesting, like thinking about that, because once again, it was just another escape. Like, what else was it taking away from? I will also share that I was still binging that entire time. So this was into I'm 33 now. This was into my early 30s. And I had pretty much gone my entire life binging. Like, I didn't even know what it felt like to not binge. I had bouts of not binging actively, but for the majority of my life, almost every single day or most days out of the week had some kind of binge in it, or just intense period of eating past fullness. It wasn't always a classic binge in terms of how you would diagnose a binge, but I mean, I was a health coach and binging on all of this health food, and it felt really, really sticky and inauthentic. And yeah, I felt like a major fraud. And I also was like trying to start this business, and I had this intuition that I did not want to coach on weight loss. That was never my agenda. But at the same time, I didn't really know what else to coach on. And so I coined it at the time like weight release. And I really did believe that like the emotional weight that you get to release when food is not the obsession anymore and you're not constantly fixated on your body. I would never coin it that way again, because it's such like that's just not how I want people to enter into my community. It has a major fat phobia in it. Which is so deeply problematic. And I apologize for everybody who was in my community at that time who had to buy into that marketing. But I was so much more interested in helping my clients heal their relationships with food, even though it was slightly distorted still at that time. But without even really putting myself first and thinking about, hey, how can we do this? And I just I had another moment in my life, not a rock bottom, but definitely a big, big, big bump where I just realized something else is going on. Like I can't continue living my life, even though I'm not purging anymore. Like I can't continue my life still binging, and also just the emotional aspect of this, how anxious I am all the time with food and my body and all of these things. And so that was kind of like the next turning point that I had to figure out in my life and in my business at this point as well too.
And yeah, was there any sort of like a theme or emotional triggers that led you to be so controlling with your diet and your eating?
Yeah, there's a lot. Where to begin?
Maybe just like, yeah, key events in your life, if there's anything that may have played a contributing factor. I mean, there's probably multiple, I imagine.
Yeah, there's multiple. And I think, the truth is at the core of it, it really goes back to my tendency towards people pleasing and the perfectionism that's rooted in that, and an unclassical, is that even a word? Unclassical. It was not classic perfectionism. So I think when people hear that word, they think, oh, someone who's super type A, who always gets straight A's and has their hair done perfectly and their nails done and has, is dating like the hot person and has all their ducks lined up, at least on paper. And for me, I never identified with the word perfectionist because I kind of branded myself through life as the chill girl and the go with the flow girl and the person who can like be everything to everybody, as long as nobody is mad at me, as long as nobody is, as long as I'm not causing a ripple in the water or anything, and I can kind of just like coast through life, because I couldn't articulate it at this time, but I had this deep fear of those emotions. I didn't know how to sit with discomfort. I didn't know how to be with those feelings that err on the more negative side in this culture. And I also had a bias towards negative feelings and negative emotions as well too, rather than just looking at emotions as emotions and feelings as feedback, like I know now, and I really try to practice now and teach now. But growing up, I had this aversity towards any kind of discomfort. I'm also a highly sensitive person. I consider myself an empath. And so that also means just being really attuned to other people's emotions, and just the kind of like the energy of a space and an environment, and being able to kind of read a room and just feel into if things are off or if things are going well. And so because I have this heightened sense of that, and I always have, I really didn't know this about myself until the past few years either, but that was always a part of me. I just couldn't name it. But I remember growing up all through childhood and into college and into the beginning of my career, knowing when things were off and being able to kind of like pick up on other people's emotion, and also just the fear of people getting mad, or people, the discomfort that came with all of that. And so the unknown, I guess, is the best way we can kind of capture all of this. I just had really huge fear of not knowing things, like not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing, and not trusting that I would be able to handle what did happen. And just this fear of disappointing people or people being mad or not doing enough or not being enough. And I also, want to just express as well too, I am very, very grateful. I had a really great childhood. My parents are still married to this day. They really brought us up in a loving home, a really empowering home. Every family has their own story as well too. And so my family is not perfect. Nobody's family is perfect. And so there was so much love, but also there's family trauma that comes up that we didn't even talk about growing up. And a lot of families don't. And so this is me speaking more professionally now. Like, I wasn't able to name that, but I could feel that growing up. And so I think all of these things, as well as a genetic disposition to this, kind of created a perfect environment for developing an eating disorder and major disordered eating.
When you say genetic predisposition, a genetic predisposition to what exactly?
Eating disorders.
Mm-hmm. And so, without going into too much around your family, then is this something? Is this a pattern in your family?
It's not a pattern that is yes and no. And just to protect members of my family and whatnot, I would prefer not to go into it too much. But definitely, from a mental health perspective, we definitely have things in my family lineage that have perpetuated and kind of correlate with the disposition towards eating disorders, if not just a full-on eating disorder. So it's there. It's definitely there.
And so you mentioned that your teeth were being affected. Was your health affected in any other way?
Thank God, no. Other than my mental health and the emotional health, which I really think is as equivalent to physical health. Yes, those were greatly impacted, but physically speaking, no, that is the only part that was really impacted. Thank God. And there's so many other things that could have happened from that. And, I see it a lot. The evidence is there. It's really scary. Without being morbid and just being honest, eating disorders are deadly. They take lives every single day. And so there's a lot to really be wary of, and it's not anything to play around with either.
The big one that I see is like the hormonal and the fertility issues that no one thinks of at a young age in your teenage years about whether or not you want to have kids a decade down the track. And so,
absolutely,
it is sometimes that point of maybe having challenges falling pregnant or fertility issues or recurrent miscarriages that then gets people to look back into some of their behaviors, and it's like the second turning point for them, or the second rock bottom for them, to look a little bit deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And my husband and I aren't at a place where we're trying to have a family yet. And so I don't know, Jen, like, I hope that'll be okay if and when we do decide to have a family. But that's one of the parts that's unknown. And I also just have to trust. And I think this has also been a big part of just recovery and my journey and working with my body rather than against it, and getting on like team me, is just knowing that whatever happens, that's not a re-entry point into a shame cycle for me.
So you've gotten more comfortable in the unknown.
100%. Whatever happens, that's not something that I anticipate putting me back into my past. That's something that allows me to work with what's happening presently, and also to trust that I can handle that difficult emotion, whatever that might be, whether it's related to kids or like anything in life. And and giving myself a space to just to feel the emotions. I was so scared of feeling the emotions for so long, and associating them with negativity and being bad because I was feeling something bad, that I tried to avoid that as much as possible through all of these mechanisms, through controlling food, through controlling my body, through controlling just all of these areas of my life. And now it really is just, it's giving myself the space to say, this isn't great, and that's okay. I don't feel great, and that's okay. And also, this will pass. Like, really keeping that in mind, really getting honest and acknowledging this is just one moment in time. This is a hard moment in time. This doesn't define you, and this will pass. And the beauty of healing your relationship with food and your body, at least as it's been for me and many, many, many of my clients, is it's not about a finish line. It's not linear. It's not like go through these 12 steps and then you're healed. Like, you'll never have to do anything again. It's being on the journey with yourself. And also it's getting to a place where, because I do want to actually help people to feel better. And so it really is creating a foundation to where you can live your life without food in your body being the focus, and have that constant state of curiosity and appreciation and resilience to trust your body and roll with life, feel all the feelings, have tools to be able to navigate the feelings physically, mentally, and emotionally. And also to create more space in that too, right? Because my hope also is that for the majority speaking, most days are more on the upside than the downside. But the downside does not mean that something is like that you're failing, or that you're bad, or that this is the precursor to years to come or whatnot. It's a bump, and that's where growth really comes in, when we can look at the bump as a growth moment, and also not bypass the emotions that we need to actually feel through those bumps, and to take care of ourselves. Boundary setting is huge. Emotional expression is huge. Feeling your emotions, communicating, getting to a place where you can communicate and articulate what you need. All of these have been really, really pivotal tools in my own journey, and ones that I really try to cultivate with everybody that I work with as well too. See, it's not just about the food.
No, we've just talked about everything but the food, I think. And it's
pretty much.
This is just such a great conversation to get people thinking deeper again. So how do people find you if they want to just look more into your work and body image and intuitive eating?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And everyone who's listening, I am giving you a huge hug right now. I know this was a deep conversation. And if you're hearing this and feeling triggered, or the emotions come up, please just take a breath right now and be with those emotions, and be with yourself right now. If you want to reach out to me, if you want to just be in my community, I have a podcast as well, which Jen has been on. It's called the Modern Girl Podcast, where we talk about body image stories with really incredible people from all different walks of life. You can also connect with me on my website. It's KatelynParsons.com. I have a lot of free information on there, blogs, workshops, material that really will help your own relationship with food, hopefully, and your body. And then Instagram as well too is probably the best social media platform. But thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate it. And I also just want to acknowledge that it's not all doom and gloom. This is not, we just had a really heavy conversation, and there is so much healing in humor, and being able to bring lightness to conversations like this. And when we start to really peel back the weeds and the layers, it creates space to really be able to laugh together and look at this a little more lightheartedly, and just find that glimmer of expression as well too.
Oh, absolutely. I've just been interviewing so many people with their backstories, their pain stories, and there's always a little bit of giggling going on. And some people who are probably suffering or looking from afar might be going, why are you guys laughing? But it's like you learn so much and you do look back on it and see the lessons in these experiences, even the horrible stuff that sometimes happens.
Absolutely. I mean, I could create a million memes for my life right now. And just all of the bullshit that I put my body through. And I'm grateful to be where I am now. And I'm also grateful for the journey ahead and just being in this moment in time. So it's pretty cool. Thank you again. This is awesome.
Oh, no, I love the conversations that we have. And one of the reasons I brought you on is to share that story, because I know that you have moved with it and passed much of it, and that you are helping so many people with the work that you do and the coaching that you do.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Anything shared on this episode is for information only. It does not replace professional advice from a healthcare practitioner. If you are experiencing pain, injury, or illness, seek advice that is catered to your individual needs. Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. If you're interested in working with me, I offer online courses for the general public and trainings for practitioners, therapists, and coaches. I also open limited one-to-one coaching spaces throughout the year. If you would like to find out more, head to my website, drjinong.com.